Welcome back to The Explainer. Today, we're tracking down the absolute holy grail of archaeology, the untouched mummy. Now, when we think of ancient Egypt, we usually picture this highly pristine, reverent pursuit of immortality, right? Bodies meticulously preserved with precious salts, fragrant oils, and layers upon layers of dazzling gold. But the reality on the ground? It's vastly different. We're actually looking at a landscape that is just littered with violent ancient crime scenes left behind by ruthless tomb robbers. Okay, let's dive right into this. What can a 4,000-year-old crime scene actually teach us about eternity? Well, to figure that out, we're going on a geographic journey across 3 active archaeological sites in Egypt where researchers are literally racing against the clock. By looking at what ancient looters destroyed, and miraculously what they missed, we're going to uncover some massive, history-rewriting revelations. But before we hit our first site, we really need to understand the stakes here. You see, the ancient Egyptian concept of the soul wasn't just one single spirit. It was like a giant puzzle. It was incredibly complex. You had the Ren, which was your name and identity, the Ib, your heart and the seat of your soul, the Shut, your shadow, the Ba, your unique personality, the Ka, your vital life force, and finally the Hat, the physical body itself. For a person to actually achieve eternal life, all of these elements, especially that Hat, had to be meticulously preserved and protected. But that delicate preservation collided head-on with human greed. Just look at the brutal methodology of these ancient looters. They didn't quietly slip in and steal a few amulets. They systematically destroyed the cot. They would literally break mummies in half just to get at the gold hidden deep in the wrappings. And then, absolutely terrified of the infamous mummy's curse, they'd burn the remains so the dead couldn't rise up and take revenge. So the crucial point to take away here is that this wasn't just simple grave robbery. It was the complete spiritual annihilation of these people, which resulted in a devastating loss of historical and biological data for modern archaeologists.
Section 1. The quarry workers' tombs down at Jebel el-Sisala.
At this incredible site, we're dropping in with husband and wife team John Ward and Maria Nilsson. They're in their 13th season excavating the graves of the middle-class stonemasons who literally built the grand monuments of Egypt. And the pressure right now is immense. The team has exactly 6 hours remaining on their excavation permit for the entire season. Every single minute counts. Suddenly, while Maria's excavating a mutilated mummy inside Tomb 9, she spots something terrifying in the sand, fresh tracks from a potentially deadly snake right next to the body. They simply don't have the time to wait for professionals to clear it. They just have to tap the stones, pray they scared the thing off, and cautiously keep digging. Despite the danger, and with that clock ticking down, Maria makes a fascinating discovery. Right there in the stone, she finds a Senet board. Senet was this famous funerary game meant to map out the hazards of the afterlife. I mean, the great King Tutankhamun was actually buried with 5 of them. But unlike those ornate royal boards, this game was carved directly into the bedrock, sitting perfectly in the shade of the quarry. This wasn't some mystical tomb offering. It was a game played by the everyday builders and masons while they were on their lunch break. It's just a remarkably human touch that connects us right back to the past.
Back inside the tombs, though, the reality is a lot darker. Team member Trisha Coletto uncovers not 1, but 2 mummies in Tomb 9, and they were burnt to such intense heat by those ancient looters that their white bones literally turned blue. The resin used in the mummification essentially baked into stone, fusing the 2 bodies completely together. With only an hour left, Maria and Trisha have to make the agonizing decision to rebury them just to keep them safe until the next season. Meanwhile, John is literally crawling headfirst through this incredibly claustrophobic looter's tunnel into Tomb 15. He pushes all the way through and finds a pristine original doorway with beautifully dressed masonry. That's a massive indicator that whoever was buried in there was someone of incredibly high status.
Which brings up a massive question. To really understand high-status burials and the chaotic aftermath of tomb robbing, we have to travel 75 miles north to the Asafif necropolis in Luxor. Archaeologists here are looking at a massive, seemingly senseless ancient crime scene that really begs the question, why on earth were 350 mutilated mummies dumped in one single spot?
Section 2. The martyred vizier at the Asafif necropolis in Luxor.
To figure this out, we join a Spanish archaeological team led by Francisco Martin Valentin, along with Veronica Garcia Martinez and Alberto. They are working inside a ruined tomb chapel, and they've uncovered some wild political intrigue. The tomb belonged to Hui. He was the vizier, basically second only to the pharaoh, serving under Amenhotep III. But when the next pharaoh, Akhenaten, took over, he radically forced the entire kingdom to worship just one god. Hui refused to abandon the old gods, and for that defiance, he was murdered. His killers systematically vandalized his tomb, chipping away his face and his name to completely destroy his Ren, essentially denying him eternity. But today, after 11 years of painstakingly piecing together thousands of shattered fragments, the team has finally found and restored a piece of Hui's face, symbolically returning his soul to the afterlife. Okay, but what about that staggering number we saw a minute ago? 350. That's the exact number of mummies found scattered and deliberately dismembered all around Hazi's tomb. Later robbers literally tore these bodies apart with terrifying precision. And why? Specifically to stop the dead from rising up and taking revenge on them for stealing their precious amulets. So who were these 350 victims? Well, Veronica and Alberto used a tiny camera, an endoscope, to look way up through the nose of one of these mutilated skulls. And what they saw was wild. They discovered that the brain had been completely removed. This was a highly expensive, deeply prestigious part of the mummification process. It proved beyond a shadow of a doubt that these weren't just commoners. These were high-status elites who actually made pilgrimages just to be buried as close as possible to the martyred vizier Hui after the old gods were finally restored. So we've seen the absolute devastation that looters leave behind, right? Bodies burned to blue ash and scattered into hundreds of pieces. But what happens when the looters actually miss? What happens when a mummy survives the millennia completely untouched? To find out, we're traveling 115 miles south, right to Egypt's ancient frontier. Section 3, The Boy Governor at Cubet El Hawa in Aswan. It's here that Professor Alejandro Jimenez Serrano made the discovery of a lifetime just last year, a 4,000-year-old, totally undisturbed wooden coffin sitting exactly where it was placed millennia ago. The hieroglyphs on the outside instantly gave the team a goldmine of data. His name was Shemai. He held this incredibly powerful title, priest and overseer of the grain store. He came from a massive political dynasty too. His father was a governor, and his grandfather was Sarenput I, the founding governor of the whole region. But here's the real mystery. On his grandfather's incredibly intricate family tomb portrait carved nearby, Shemai is entirely missing. Why in the world would such a highly titled, powerful elite be left out of his own family's portrait? To solve this puzzle, Alejandro needs to get a CT scan to see what's beneath the wrappings. And let me tell you, this is a tense, high-stakes operation. Because Shemai is completely intact, he is an absolute jackpot for looters, potentially covered in gold and jewels under those bandages. Moving him to a modern hospital requires a deeply dangerous journey through the dark city streets under a heavy armed police escort. But once they finally get Shemai safely into the CT scanner, they uncover their first massive twist. The forensic anthropologists examine the skeleton hidden beneath the wrappings. They find a mix of baby teeth and adult teeth, and a skeleton that measures just 4 feet 1 inch tall. Shemai was only 9 years old when he died. Talk about the ultimate padded resume, right? He never actually managed the region's grain. These incredibly lofty titles were just a posthumous promotion given by his grieving family to make sure he had high status in the afterlife. And this brilliantly illustrates a really fascinating wealth divide in ancient Egyptian society. You see, elite mummies found near the capital, like Tutankhamun, underwent court mummification. Their brains were drained through the nose, and their faces were totally drenched in these highly expensive tree resins. But Shemai? Even with his family's vast wealth, he received provincial mummification. The scan showed his brain was left completely intact inside his shriveled skull, and he was buried with just a simple ceramic necklace. Being way out on the southern frontier meant they simply didn't have access to the master embalming specialist that you'd find back in the capital. Section 4. Rewriting Ancient History. A scientific revelation from the scanner. By looking super closely at the specific thickness of Shemai's bones and the unique shape of his nasal cavity, the scanner revealed a history-altering secret that completely upended our understanding of the ancient ruling class. Shemai had distinctly Nubian features. He was likely a black African from neighboring Nubia. For the longest time, the strict assumption was that the Egyptian elite were entirely Mediterranean in their descent. But Shemai proves that out on the frontier, the ancient ruling class was actually a beautifully mixed ethnic society. As Professor Alejandro Jimenez Serrano so perfectly put it, regardless of his background, Shemai was fully Egyptian, holding the very highest of titles. Which really brings us to our final thought today. We started out looking at the absolute devastation caused by ancient looters chasing shiny treasures. But as we've seen, through all this painstaking reconstruction, the CT scans, and the endless dedication of these researchers, the true treasure isn't the gold at all. It's the enduring historical legacy of these people. By rescuing them from the ashes, restoring their faces, returning their names, the Ren, and finally telling their true stories, are these modern caretakers actually granting the ancients the true, eternal immortality they sought thousands of years ago?